it's Stacy from Passion Progress. Today I'm gonna make homemade panettone bread, which is an Italian bread often served at the holidays. I have two different variations I've made in the past, including a fruit one, and today I'm gonna make a chocolate panettone. So make sure to follow along, like and subscribe, and I'm gonna go through the whole process of making panettone right at home. Okay, we have 1 cup of warm water. They said 110 degrees Fahrenheit. We're gonna add 1/4 cup of sugar and 1 packet of active dry yeast. This is fast acting instant yeast. I believe it's like 2.25 ounces or something, but it's the little packets you can get. Then add that all in there and then mix it around. Whisk it around. And then we're gonna let that sit for about 10 minutes. It's gonna get really frothy. That's when you know it's ready. I have a little pro tip for you. Making bread at home is so easy if you use a food processor or a blender or a stand mixer. You don't have to knead it by hand. So while this is still getting frothy, waiting my 10 minutes, I'm gonna put the rest of the ingredients in here. 2 eggs. So I've seen panettone recipes that use yogurt and also ones that use milk. The one I'm using calls for 1/2 cup of yogurt. I haven't tried one with milk, so I can't really say, but I do know that my yogurt one worked really well and I loved the texture and consistency of it. So that's what I'm going for. So we need 1/2 cup of yogurt. I'm using 2%. Next, you need some vanilla extract. I'm at the end of mine. I think it's a teaspoon, but you know, can't really go wrong with vanilla extract. And then 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Kosher is what I'm using. If you have table salt, that works too. Definitely need salt for flavor. It brings out the sweetness too. And then just mix that around for a minute. A little bit to mix everything around. We're almost there with our yeast. It just needs a couple more minutes. I don't know if you can see that. We're at like 8 minutes right now. Then we'll add that to this. The only other ingredient is flour. It's that simple. Another piece of equipment you may want, I'm using an 8-inch springform pan. I find this works really well because it has room to rise, it keeps a nice round shape, and then it's really easy to remove if you haven't used one of these before. That means you can just take it right off and you don't have any issues getting it out of the pan. I'm a huge fan of the springform pan. I'm gonna show you all. It's been 10 minutes. I think you can see how frothy that is. So we're gonna pour that in. And then one other ingredient I forgot that's super important is orange zest. And the reason why is this is gonna really bring out the chocolate, and also orange flavoring is really common when it comes to panettone. Any citrus really, if you prefer lime or lemon, you could definitely do that as well. In this like microplane and all of the other things, in case you wanna purchase them, you can find it all over on passionprogress.com. along with more recipe details. I always do this, I always take my finger down the back, because look at all that orange zest. You want to really get that in there. That's so much flavor in the zest. I'm just gonna do one little quick spin of this. And now I'm gonna start adding my flour. It calls for 4 cups of flour. It's a lot of flour. So, one thing I don't know if people know about measuring out flour, you definitely don't want to pack it tight. You've got to do it loose, which is why I hit the side of the bag like that, so that it's not overly tight. You don't want it to be like packed down like when you do brown sugar. That with brown sugar you want it packed down, but with flour you don't, because otherwise it's too much. A lot of people do it by weight. Obviously that is a better choice. I personally, as a home cook, or home baker, I don't like to use measuring. I think it's just not necessary, but if you're a really precise baker, then yeah, you should definitely consider measuring by weight. It's just not something that I've ever done, and my baking usually turns out pretty well. Let me get that last cup in there. Might have been better for me to do 2 at a time and then mix it a little, but let's see how it comes together with my food processor. The cool part is this does all the work for me. It's gonna be on for 5 minutes, but it's gonna come together as a beautiful dough ball. I can already see it's working. So, you know, the original recipe calls for kneading for 5 to 10 minutes. This does all the work for me. So here's my dough, looking pretty good. I'm gonna do just a little bit of hand kneading because I feel like it. And sometimes it's nice to get your hands a little dirty. I actually love the process of using my hands when I bake. I think it's super therapeutic and super relaxing. So if you feel the same, it doesn't hurt to use a little bit more flour. Don't want it to get too dry. I think I might have used a little too much, but you can hand knead a little bit. People are always so surprised that I like do so much in my free time, but I really love to bake because I find it almost like meditative. It's like therapy for me. So anyway, after about 10 minutes or 5 to 10 minutes, you'll have a beautiful ball like this. We're gonna let it rise for an hour. It should double in size. I'll be back. Okay, one step, so I should just tell you, it's a lot easier to show you. Spray a bowl with cooking spray, add your ball of dough, and then we're gonna cover this with a damp, warm towel and let it rise for an hour, like I said. I mean, my dough is still rising, but you do need to prep your chocolate or whatever you're gonna put inside. So this recipe calls for 1 cup of dark chocolate. I'm using these chocolate wafers by Ghirardelli, and I'm gonna chop them up into smaller pieces because I don't want them to be that large, but it doesn't have to be perfect. They can be, you know, varying sizes. I don't think it matters too much. I like the thought of using these chocolate wafers instead of chocolate chips because I like that the sizes are gonna be different, not like so uniform like chocolate chips. I actually like the thought of having kind of like slivers of chocolate. So, but you can do whatever you want. If you don't like chocolate, this is the point where you can use any dried fruit. The other recipe I have, I use apricots, cherries. You can use dried cranberries, dried blueberries, really whatever you want. Generally, it's more on the citrus and stone fruit, but honestly, you can't really go wrong with whatever flavors you like. The bread isn't super sweet on its own, and this is what adds that sweetness. We are also at the end gonna add a little more sweetness, which is optional, but you can use some confectioner's sugar and honey at the end to make it sweeter. Just really depends on your flavor preferences. I like using the mix-ins to add the flavor, but if you do want to have more flavor, there are recipes that probably make a sweeter bread than this one. I like that it's not overly sweet, but if you do like a sweeter bread, this might not be your recipe, or you might want to do way more on the fruit or chocolate mix-ins. It's been an hour. The bread's been rising this whole time. So next step is prepare your pan. We're gonna actually put it in here after we add our chocolate and let it rise in here for another 30 minutes. You wanna make sure it's sprayed really well, obviously. Don't want it to stick. Now let's look at our dough. Let's see how it's risen. Not huge, but it's about doubled in size. Now, in order to incorporate the chocolate really well, I'm actually gonna do it in phases because you wanna make sure that it's incorporated really well. You don't want all chocolate in one spot. So I'm gonna mix it a few different times, kind of knead it so that the chocolate gets incorporated really well. Because I have made it before where I didn't do this and then it was all in like one spot, and obviously that's not the goal. We want chocolate throughout. So here we go. We're gonna put this in here, cover it again with a damp towel and let it rise for another 30 minutes. As you can see, the bread has risen pretty nicely. It's not quite as big as I was hoping, but it's been rising for about 50 minutes. Originally, I thought I would do 30 to 40, but now I'm gonna brush some melted butter on it, and then we're gonna put it in the oven at 350 for 45 minutes. The butter will help it brown up in the oven and also give it a nice richness. We're gonna brush it again when we take it out. Get all that butter. I did about a tablespoon, maybe 2. This baby just came out of the oven. It was in there for less than 40 minutes. It cooked really fast. I wanted to unmold it, show you how pretty this baby looks. Wow. Hope you can tell how pretty she is. Here, let me show you guys. Beautiful, chocolatey. It's gonna be so chocolatey. There's a ton of chocolate in there. Now the good stuff. Let's put some melted butter on here. So in the one that I do with fruit, I like to add honey because I think it gives it a really nice contrast with the fruit. But because this one is chocolate, I'm not gonna do honey. Although I think those flavors can work, I personally think it's gonna be more delicious if I just use butter. So